Okay, morning, Dr. Crick. Thanks for meeting with us in the MSc HRD
You're very
program.
welcome. My pleasure.
Yes, all right, for HRD TV, we wanted to talk about emotional labor. That is your
Yes,
specialization.
it is.
So, the first thing I want to know is what exactly is emotional labor and why would it be important for persons in HR and org behavior research to know about emotional labor?
Okay. So, emotional labor is about individuals in the performance of their work actually using their emotions to create a desired impact on the other person. So, to give you an example, you are a flight attendant and you want to calm down a patient, who, not a patient, a passenger who is a little bit agitated, then you might use your soothing voice. Or if you are a salesperson, you might use emotional labor to try to have the individual purchase more. So it is something that we do, but I want to stress you have a desired impact that you want to have on the individual. And emotional labor is often dependent on what the organization promises. So, for example, hospitality, which is one of the areas that I study, normally we say we give you a warm welcome. So that emotional labor is creating that warm welcome and the person feeling warmly welcomed.
Okay, well, I'm glad you say it depends on what the organization wants because I was reading, and I was thinking that if you were in the JDF and you're at some incursion somewhere, so you're in riot police, you don't want to come off feeling warm and
Perfect.
friendly. You want to
Perfect.
be a little more stern or something. Or if you're a lecturer here at the University of the West Indies and you suspect somebody of cheating,
Exactly.
you call them into your office and you're not going to be warm and friendly.
No. So I did my little homework in preparation. So this is Hosha's book, The
Okay.
Managed Heart.
Yes.
And in it, this is what she was the one who started the whole field.
Yes.
And she speaks to two groups of people. She speaks first of all to flight attendants. I already mentioned them. And then she also speaks about debt collectors.
Okay.
And the debt collectors, of course, fall into your second group. So the idea is, yes, you are supposed to make the person feel threatened. Right,
Because
so
that is what the
that's
organization
what the
wants.
organization wants. If you are, we watch detective shows and they talk about good cop, bad cop.
Yes.
So they may both be acting. So it's to create a particular emotion, which is not always positive for sure.
Okay. Why is it important? Because I'm thinking that one of the words that came to my mind when you were talking about this was manipulation
Yes.
of people. You're manipulating both the client or the organization, but you're also manipulating the workers. So I was wondering how that affects the workers.
Okay, that's a great question. So first of all, why is it important? Well, Hochschild, when she was doing her work, she actually referred to the U.S. Airline industry when it became deregulated. And when that happened, there was the competition dramatically increased. So had to lower their prices and to try to make themselves more competitive. So the kind of airline industry that we now know where, you're squeezed in, you can barely breathe and they throw a thing of peanuts at you if you're lucky and so on. That's as a result of the deregulation when they were trying to find ways to compete. So what she said, one of the ways in which they also competed was using the services of their flight attendant. And in some areas, not so much these days, like within the last 10, 15 years, but certainly when she was writing and prior to that, flight attendants were like sex goddesses. So, their bodies were very important. So it's actually used a lot as a way of differentiating one organization from the other. So that is the part about being important. Now, to the second question that you asked me about the manipulation. Husha was very careful to differentiate between emotional labor and emotional work. Now, emotional work is when I'm a lecturer, so a student comes in and I like, oh my gosh, I just want to finish this research paper. I don't want to talk to you, but I will be polite and say, sure, not a problem, have a seat, etc. Or you're dealing with a difficult family member. So we're all used to that. Emotional labor now is when you're paid for that and it's a requirement of your job. So I hope later you'll ask me to talk about the fact that you are being paid for it, but not really. But we can deal with that later. So in that context, then it becomes emotional labor. So she made that differentiation. Now, some critics said to her, but suppose you really feel it. Is that therefore emotional labor? In other words, the distinction between emotional work that I just made, something you do in your private sphere willingly, to soothe grandma, sort of thing, and take that over into the public sphere, the paid sphere. If you genuinely feel, you see an older person coming towards you and you feel empathy, and you're supposed to be nice to them, but you really do feel like being nice to them, is that emotional labor? And in fact, quite a lot of people did research saying that the benefits of emotional labor to you, the laborer, because you feel good, it breaks up the day, it makes you feel happy that you have made this. For example, I had an aunt who, the only person I know who formed relationships with supermarket cashiers, because I look for the shortest line. My aunt had her cashier and her bagger, and they really had a good relationship going. So, I mean, there was that connection. Honestly, they look forward to it. So that on their part was not emotional labor. They genuinely wanted to give it, even though the supermarket clearly also wanted that.
Well, actually, Sovereign in Ligani, they have that, you have baggers who look for you in the line and come in my line.
Right. And it's not always, cynics who say, oh, because of the tip. Yes, sometimes no. Sometimes it's just a genuine connection, because remember, we are human beings at the baseline. So if you have to go to work for 8 hours, you are going to make connections. This person reminds me of my grandmother or my, uncle who kind of struggles with the thing. Let me go over and help them to use a computer. So we are going to have those feelings. And I think the distinction is not as absolute as we would think. Yeah.
And I think also that the need for it in all kinds of jobs.
Yes.
For instance, as you were mentioning, you're a lecturer having to be nice to a student. I'm an administrator who deals with students.
Right.
I see them in the supermarket on Saturday and they want to talk to me about the university's business.
Absolutely.
I mean, that is my private sphere. But then I am paid to be nice to them.
Yes.
And the University of the West Indies might think, be nice to them even on Saturday evening.
Because you are still the same individual, no matter what.
Yes, where they see me, and whatever time they see me.
Right.
So again, as you say, the distinction might not be so clear. Or I think it has bled in. Even I think we switch our roles. Maybe our role, we don't turn off our roles. Because I think if I were to say no to a student, I'm not speaking to you, this is Saturday, this is my private time, it will reverberate on Monday.
But it would also reverberate to you. You probably would feel some guilt about that too. Because so that's the other connection with emotional labor, that the individual basically is a brand. So you are the UWI brand. So you would feel that, okay, I was within my rights, I'm off the clock, but still this represents my organization badly.
That's true. Yes,
so
that's true.
So we do feel that you do feel that as a employee of a particular airline, even though you are your shift is over, you see someone struggling, you're like, okay, I'm still in my Delta Caribbean Airlines uniform. You're still in your persona, even if you're not physically in the uniform, you still do that. And that's the human part of us also to some extent, but it can become overwhelming.
Yes, it can, and that is, I think, why it would be important for HR people to know about it, because then they can work with their employees to manage the negative effects.
So burnout is one of the obvious things that happens, and the more caring the job. So my job is a caring job as a lecturer, but the interaction is less intense than, say, if you were a social worker or dealing with drug addicted people and so on, because then it's really deep and intense, and people, any caring profession like that, the burnout rate would be very high. So when I'm teaching it, I explain to students that is why nurses, for example, people sometimes say, oh, they're callous, they're uncaring. I took my relative in there and I thought he was dying, and they were like, well, he has to take a number. And they think that's so cold, but part of that is burnout, that they have to detach, or part of it is taught detachment, not to treat everybody really in the same way that you want them to treat them, but that your relative would want. But secondly, it's like a callus forms over you after a while. So that was again one of the things that Hochschild worried about. That do you lose the ability to feel after a while?
Okay. One more little thing. I was in my reading. Hochschild had 3 things: cognitive, the bodily, and the expressive types of emotional labor. You have anything to say about those?
Well, the cognitive is really about framing it in your head. So she makes this distinction when she's speaking about emotional labor, about whether you actually surface act or deep act. No, surface acting is when, I just smile, oh, Olivine, lovely to meet you, sort of thing. But so, I don't hate meeting you, but I'm just saying it because it's my training. We're being polite, yes. Right? Or I'm not really in the mood, but I fake a smile or whatever in the course of my job. Deep acting is when you literally embrace the role. So this is when and that's the cognitive shift now, when you might say, for example, let's say you're a flight attendant and you have a difficult passenger. You might say to yourself, I think this man is kind of afraid of flying. My dad is afraid of flying. And then you see that person as your dad. Right? So you respond to them in that way. Now, the concern is that you have made that deep connection, hence the deep acting. But what does that do to you as the individual if you connect with all of your clients, customers, whatever, in that way? You understand that burnout would come a lot faster than if you just were kind of dispassionate about it. She calls it, I think, healthy estrangement. Okay. So you do the job, but you're somewhat distant from it. So that's the cognitive. The bodily is using because the body and expressive are connected, because what you're actually doing is you're expressing it. So if I say to you, welcome to Singapore Airlines, I've said the words, but so I have to have the whole persona to go with it. Absolutely. Well, pretty much every organization. So then there's that other side of it, scripted versus non-scripted, which is a whole big debate, because scripted because you want people to say the same things, and it's a brand, so you want them to say, do you want a biggie size, does that complete your order, welcome, and so you want that. But on the other hand, the more scripted it becomes, the more robotic the person is, and she actually uses that term. So you really do want people's faces to, in Jamaica we say plastic smile, because we know that you have smile, but it's not real. So we want that expressiveness to be real.
Okay. Okay, yes, and a lot of people actually say that I'm passionate about my work.
Yes.
That, of course, is debatable. Yeah. Because sometimes you don't feel the passion, but when you talk, you use your hands, you lean forward.
Exactly, to demonstrate what you're supposed to feel as well.
Exactly. So the thing, though, is that, as you say, some people genuinely have a disposition, they do feel these things. And so that is that's actually another one of the determinants. So I wanted to talk in another video, which we'll do after your call.
Yes, okay, sure.
Okay.